Hey, what's going on? Charles Austin here, and let's be fit forever. So, as you can see, today I want to talk to you a little bit about vitamin B12. Okay, so this is probably something that you've heard. Yes, I absolutely need vitamin B12. I got to make sure I get my B12. B12 here, B12 there. But why do we need B12? Where are the best places to get it? What happens if we don't get enough? We'll dive into all that stuff here today. But as always, before we do, make sure you always subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed. Also like this video, and then also turn those notifications on so that you're always up to date with the latest content on here on the channel. As you can see here on the channel, I have all of my playlists divided up. So if you're interested in learning about how dairy is terrible for you, I have a whole Dairy is Death series. I have a series on sports specific training, a whole series on nutrition, exercise, and fitness. If you want to learn about chronic disease, which is my specialty, got a whole playlist on that, and I continue to add more and more and more and more content each and every week. All right. But like I said, today I want to talk to you a little bit about vitamin B12. As you can kind of see here in this image, you'll notice many of the sources are animal protein based, as you can see here. Looks like we got some fish up here, some more types of seafood here, some dairy products, which we should never be consuming. I believe they put some, looks like some cereal down here, because sometimes, yeah, cereals are fortified with B12. We'll talk about that today. And then, yes, there are traces of B12 in fungus, as you can see here with mushroom. Not a whole lot, is very, very small, so I wouldn't say that'd be the best option to say, hey, I'm going to get all my B12 from mushrooms. But hey, you do get a little bit. But anywho, let's go ahead and dive right in, as I always like to do, and get started with today. So real quick, let's talk about what vitamin B12 is. All right. So as it says here, vitamin B12, and I always try to figure out how to say this word. I'm going to try cobalamin. I don't know if that's right or not. But anyway, I'll just call it B12 or whatever here today. But it plays an essential role in red blood cell formation. And as we know, red blood cells, if you don't know, or if you do know, red blood cells help carry oxygen throughout our bodies. So that's super important, right? It also helps with cell metabolism. And anytime you hear cell metabolism, that's basically the process of your cells getting energy from the food that we eat. So in order for us to get energy from the foods that we eat, we need our cells to get that energy inside them. So that's what we're talking about here. Nerve function, the production of DNA, and which of course is the molecules, of course, that carry our genetic information and makes us who we are, right? So some of the best sources, right? And I'll go ahead and put this out here, right? If you're new to the channel, you may not know I'm like 100% vegan. Have been for several years now. I've been vegetarian for even more. But this is one of the things that if you're on a strictly plant-based diet or a highly plant-based diet, if you're very, very vegetarian, B12 is one of those vitamins that may be something that you have to pay attention to a little bit more. Now, everything else, all your other major nutrients and vitamins and minerals and proteins and all that other stuff, carbs and fats, eat plenty of plants, you'll be fine. But B12 is one of those ones. It can be a little iffy, right? So as it says here, some of the best food sources of B12 include poultry, correct, right? Meat, fish, and yes, dairy is a good source, even though we should never consume dairy. Every time I make a video, I'm gonna try to make sure we remind you that you should never consume dairy products, okay? And if you don't want to just take my word for it today, check out my Dairy is Death series. You can find it on my playlist on inside the channel, right? But so as it says here, vitamin B12 is also added to some foods like certain cereals. So, depending on the type of cereals you eat, breakfast cereals and things like that, different oatmeals and things like that may have the vitamin B12 added to it as well. Okay. But if you're going to get vitamin B12 without it being added, you just go for the meat, right? Now, in the United States, as it says here, B12 is not a deficiency is not very common. But like I said already, if you're strictly vegetarian, highly vegetarian or vegan, you may want to be paying attention to your B12 intake. Okay. Now, where is it here? Oh, and the thing about B12 is the reason why it's highly concentrated, as you see here in, poultry, which we're talking about, like chicken, turkey, stuff like that, birds, if you will, different types of meats, fish, and things like that, is because animals naturally make B12 inside our bodies, even us. All right, us humans, right, which are a type of animal, we make B12 inside our body as well. But the issue is we also need to intake some more to make sure that our body functions properly. Okay. So, as it says here, some of the reasons why you want to make sure that you get enough B12 is deficiency in B12 can lead to things like anemia and fatigue. And of course, anemia is dealing with the iron content in your blood, fatigue, muscle weakness, intestinal problems, nerve damage, etc., etc. And if we're talking about fatigue and weakness here, that comes from the fact that B12 is very important for our red blood cell health. And of course, we talked about it already. Red blood cell health helps deliver oxygen throughout our body. Okay. So let's look at some more information here on B12 just a little bit. All right. So again, more research on B12 for specific activities and conditions. Right. So if you're somebody who has any type of heart disease, right, any blood vessel type disease, right. Now, hopefully, if you've been paying attention here on the channel, you've probably already been alerted that heart disease is the #1 killer of all humans on planet Earth. Okay. And of course, heart disease is, like they like to say on all the disinfectant commercials, 99.9% of germs they can kill, whatever. I'm going to go ahead and just say, hey, probably heart disease is probably like 99.9% preventable based on the way we live. Okay. Of course, there are some genetic predispositions that some people have. But anywho, so heart and any types of blood vessel diseases, right? So as it says here, research has previously believed that vitamin B12, when combined with folic acid and B6, might prevent diseases of the heart and blood vessel by reducing levels of amino acids, et cetera, et cetera. However, studies show that the combination of vitamin doesn't seem to reduce the risk of severity for cardiovascular disease and stroke. So again, what is the point here? The point is we want to be making sure that we're focusing on consuming lots of healthy plant foods like our fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, beans, things like that, legumes, all that kind of stuff, whole grains, instead of trying to focus on a supplement, any type of popping a pill or anything like that. Okay. Now, also, if we're talking about dementia, vitamin B12 deficiency is associated with dementia and low cognitive function. Again, if you're wondering why, if we go back up here at the very beginning, when we talked about the role, we're talking about healthy red blood cell formation. Again, blood cells carrying oxygen everywhere, including to the brain, right? We're also talking about nerve function. Yes, well, your brain has lots of nerve activity as well. So you want healthy nerve function throughout your body and in your brain as well. So we want to make sure we have plenty of B12, all right? And then also athletic performance. So for any of my athletes out there, or any of my competitive athletes, or just my general workout nut like yours truly, you're going to want to have plenty of B12 as well to help with your energy levels, because it does help process the energy that we get from the foods that we eat, okay? Now, I don't want to go too far into some of these things here, so I'm going to go ahead and move on. All right. So as long as we kind of understand so far that, hey, yes, we need B12. I kind of told you some ideas of where you can get them and what happens if you don't necessarily get enough, and some of the people who may want to make sure that they're getting plenty. Right. Now, if we're talking about the best sources, let's scroll down here. Here we go. So some of the best sources for B12, right? And as it says here, if you're curious about how much you should have, average adult should get about 2.4 micrograms every day. So when you look at if you're taking a supplement or if you're looking at the nutrition label on a food, you can check out the amount of B12 that you're getting in that food, right? So as I already kind of mentioned here, if we go back to this image, you're going to see lots of animal sources of B12, because animals naturally make B12 inside their bodies, right? So again, as we can see here, we got clams, here's trout, salmon, other tuna fish, we got beef, ham, chicken, eggs, all these different animal sources of B12, right? Now again, anytime you see anything that is associated with dairy products, disregard, okay? because dairy products aren't food. I don't care what you've heard in the media. I don't care what you've heard on social media, or I don't care what athlete is out there pushing dairy products. That's not food. You want to avoid it at all costs. And that includes things like cheese. That includes things like Greek yogurt. So we're going to ignore that, right? But as you can see here, as I mentioned before, y'all know how to read nutrition labels, all right? Y'all definitely know how to read nutrition labels at this point. So definitely make sure you're doing that. So 100% fortified cereal, check the label, all right? So it just depends. Not all cereals. So some cereals, not all of them. It just depends on which one that you're eating, right? You also see here that certain non-dairy milks, they chose to focus on soy milk, but different types of almond and oat milks and things like that. It just depends. You got to check the label to see if it has B12. So, but again, the best sources to consume it naturally just comes from meat. Now, I know y'all are probably wondering, well, hey, wait a minute. Charles is talking about how you should eat all these plants, and he's talking about he's vegan. Everybody should move towards a plant-based diet. And he's saying that the best sources of B12 come from meat. True, but we're going to get into how we can work on that in just a second, right? So as it says here, should you take a multivitamin, right? So that's the question you might have to ask yourself, right? So again, foods with B12 are always going to be your best choice. But as it says here, if you're having trouble getting those foods, for somebody like me or somebody else out there that's vegan, vegetarian, you're going to want to get your B12 from other sources, okay? So let's talk about that here. And let's see. Did I want to go over who's that? We'll go over that in just a second, right? Well, we'll do it now. So real quick, before we get into the sources, let's do this one real quick here and talk about who might be at risk. Again, we already talked about vegan vegetarians might be at risk for B12 deficiency. So again, like we said, most healthy adults should get it from their regular diet. But certain conditions and drugs can interfere with the absorption. For example, like folks who suffer from Crohn's disease, pancreatic disease, diabetes, if you're on heartburn medication. And then again, we talked about vegans and vegetarians as well. And then again, if we go down here, where was it? If you're over the age of 50, you may want to also consider taking a multivitamin or a B12 supplement, just because over time we lose the ability to absorb certain things. You know, everything gets a little, as we age, things get a little worse. So there's just certain things you have to look out for. All right. So just keep that in mind. If you're any of those people, you may want to say, hey, I might want to think about looking into a B12 supplement. Okay. Now let's talk about the types. And this is where it gets important, because this is something that was a recent revelation for myself. I always like to read and learn new things about nutrition, wellness, and fitness and exercise and all that. And this is a recent revelation for me, so I want to make sure I share it with y'all. But let's talk about the forms of B12, because not all B12 is created equal. So if you look on a label, or if you see a B12 supplement and it just says B12, you got to figure out, well, what kind of B12 is it? They're not all the same, right? So let's see if we can get here. So real quick, I'm not going to give you all a chemistry lesson, right? I find chemistry interesting at times, but I'm not going to do that today, right? But so again, if we're talking about B12, we already talked about it as this word. I'm probably saying it wrong. Cobalamin. We'll just say it like that, right? So again, that's what B12 is, right? So the molecule that is attached to cobalamin is called the donor, et cetera, et cetera. Now, basically, there's a few different types. So let's go over these. So the two most common types of donors that provide B12, if you will, all right, without getting too technical into the science, are cyanide. And yeah, if you're wondering, is this the same stuff that can kill me? Yes. Okay. Now it does depend on the dosage. But yes, we are talking about the toxin that can actually harm you or kill you, right? So one of the more common supplements is cyanide, which if you look on a label or if you look on a supplement, it will say cyano cobalamin, right? So that's what it'll say. So anytime you see that cyano in front of that cobalamin, you're talking about it having cyanide. Okay. All right. And then we also have the methyl with which you'll see in front of the cobalamin as well. And then there's other ones that are not as common, hydroxyl and adenzo, silo. Okay. So these are the types of B12 that you'll see. Okay. And as it says here, these forms are present in some degree in the foods you eat for the most part, right? Now, let's really just get into the most common two, because I don't want to get into the hydroxyl or the adenosine or any of that stuff real quick. So again, this is where I want you to pay attention if you're thinking about supplementing, which is something that I do. And when I learned this, I immediately stopped taking any of the supplements that I had in my cabinet that had the cyano version. Okay, so again, Cyano B12 is cheap, and that's one of the things. It's like a red flag. If I see cheap in front of something that I'm putting in my body, unless I'm having one of my cheat days and I'm just pigging out on something, I don't want this part of my regular routine, and you shouldn't either, right? So Cyano B12 is cheap. It's synthetic. All right. So again, you see synthetic. That's not anything that's necessarily naturally occurring. Again, something you want to try to avoid. And it's slightly toxic. Okay, so again, if you're looking at this and saying, hey, where should I be getting my B12? Well, let's look at Cyano, the Cyano version. It's cheap, it's synthetic, and it's slightly toxic. May not be the best 3 words to use to describe something that you put in your body, right? So again, the inactive form of B12 that is made with the cyanide donor and is used commercially. So again, check out my video on foods. Food companies don't advertise foods; they advertise disease. Check that video out, because one of the things that I talk about there is how most of these big companies are just trying to figure out the cheapest way they can produce food. And here's a perfect example. So again, it's used commercially. All right, so it's stable because of the cyanide molecule, but again, it doesn't really absorb well at all. Okay, and again, the main thing to keep in mind here is that it's cheap, it's toxic, and the hidden price is that it comes from cyanide. Okay, so as it says here, although the amount of cyanide is considered toxicologically insignificant, humans must remove and detoxify the cyanide, in order for you to be safe. Now, if you have any issues with liver function or kidneys or anything like that, digestive issues, you may not be removing all the toxic stuff that you need to. So these are all things to consider. So again, the best thing to do is just to keep this type of B12 to its absolute minimum or eliminate it all together. So yes, again, this version, cheap, synthetic, slightly toxic. And yeah, if you want to remember the word that's associated with this one, it's cyanide. So when you're looking on your supplements, most of the ones that you probably have in your cupboard, your cabinet right now, it's gonna be the cyano version. Okay, so keep that in mind. Once I learned about this, I threw it out, and I have no problem throwing foods out that I already bought, because when you got to remember and realize is that everything that goes in your body goes everywhere, your brain, your heart, your lungs, etc., etc. Therefore, do I want to add extra cyanide into my body? I don't think so, because we have to remove it. We have to detoxify it. So yes, is it technically safe? Kind of, sort of. But if you can remove any toxins, I will probably do so, right? So what is the other version? Methyl version, all right? And this is the kind that I try to go for if I'm getting a supplement, right? I wish I had a bottle. Of the one that I have right now. But anyway, so again, methyl, it plays an important role in the synthesis of the, let's move on. Let's see. So it's transported to your nerve cells and promotes nucleic acid and protein synthesis. All good stuff. It's involved in the synthesis again, metabolism of nucleic acid, et cetera, et cetera. This version also promotes, where is it at? Where is it? Yeah, skeletal protein transport, nerve cell, et cetera, et cetera. So lots of stuff going on here with the methyl version. So let's move on and talk about this one a little bit more. So again, one of the two active forms of vitamin B12. All right. So where this type shows its greatest utility. So now what we're talking about is how B12 in the methyl version is actually awesome, right? People suffering from degenerative neurological symptoms, okay, which is pretty cool, right? So if you're anybody who suffers from any type of neurological conditions or issues, you're going to want to be making sure you're getting that methyl B12 version, right? And again, we're not having to deal with any of that cyanide stuff, right? It is the best form to help regenerate nerves and treat peripheral neuropathies. Okay, so again, any type of nervous system neurological issues, the methyl version of B12 is what you're going to want to be looking at. All right. Again, and we're not getting that cyanide, right? Version, right? So there's lots. I'm not going to read all of this stuff to y'all because y'all are probably going to go to sleep if you haven't already. But the main point is this is the better form of B12 compared to that Cyano version. Let's see. There was one more thing I wanted to share before I wrapped up here, y'all. So here's another one. In both in vitro and in vivo experiments, the methyl version of B12 inhibited. And of course, if you see the word inhibited, you're talking about slowing or stopping something, right? Proliferation, I guess, if you want to use another word, the growth of malignant cancer cells, right? So we're talking about reducing tumor growth. And look, in studies with mice, we're talking about enhancing the survival time of certain mice with tumor cells. So look, we're talking about helping with cancer, neurological issues. Again, this is going to be the better version of B12. So feel free on your own. There's the word right there. Look that up and do some research on your own. Do a little research on comparing the methyl version versus the cyano version to figure out what may be best for you. But I kind of already gave you a little bit of a head start. All right. So keep that in mind. So again, only side effects that I were able to find on this type of B12, if we go down here, maybe some headache, loss of appetite, a little nausea. Okay, that could literally happen with just about anything. But as we know, all of our bodies are different, and they may react a little bit differently depending on what we put in it. So again, this is going to be your better choice when we're talking about vitamin B12 methyl versus the cyano, right? Now, if you're wondering how the heck do I get this stuff, right? I'm just going to show you, and always go to, I don't know where everybody lives. So if you're looking at, let's see, vitamin B12. So let's just say you went on Amazon and you looked up vitamin B12 supplements. Let's see what would pull up. All right. So let me just click on one. Here we go. How about that one? Just clicking on one. Not endorsing or killing any of these brands. I'm just showing you how this works. So if you see here, it says vitamin B12, but nowhere on here is it going to show you like, yo, what kind is it, right? So what you normally have to do is you have to look a little bit further, and depending on which one, and there it is. All right, so this version right here, the cyano version. So this is probably going to be one that you may want to avoid, okay? So again, that's how easy it is to figure out which type of B12 it is, right? So you just have to search. So if you know you're looking for a specific type, something easier to do. Oops, I didn't mean to click that. But something easier to do is just do that. Bam. Look at that. So now you've limited your search results to the type that you're looking for. So again, not endorsing or killing any of these products. I'm just these brands. I'm just showing you what to look for. And as you see here, bam, they tell you exactly when you look on the back the type of B12 it is. Okay, so these generally are going to cost just a few bucks more, not anything major, just a few bucks more. And there's several different brands, so you just find the one that works best for you. Okay, whichever one you want, you read it, you do your research, find the one that works best for you. All right. So before we do a little Q&A, I'm done for the day, y'all. Before we do a little Q&A, as always, you can see on the description of this video, I've provided a link, and I provided a link to my video on why plant protein is better than meat. Why? What does that have to do with this video? Well, again, if you're looking at this video, you may say, well, I need to make sure I'm eating meat to get my B12. Well, no, I've already showed you that there's ways to get your B12 added to your food. So, and if you're thinking that, hey, I have to eat meat, check that video out again so you can understand why you probably want to avoid eating meat as well. All right, so I provided a link to that one as well. But also inside the video, you'll be able to see that I have provided a link to how you can try my 3 times to burn challenge, 2 weeks for free. If you go to my website right here, you click this link, bam, it'll take you right to the playlist where you can try 2 weeks of free workouts, total body, on demand, anytime you want, right? If you love what you're doing, you can check out the entire program, which gives you nutrition plan, support, and more. All right, so check that out. And then also, if you go to my link here, you can click for more information on how you can join my Fit Forever family. Like I shouted out some of mine earlier when we were talking about nutrition labels. I've already taught them how to do that. So check that out. Kind of gives you some information about how you can, about what's included. But if you want to learn more, you hit this little button right here, book a free consultation. It'll take you to a little page right here, to a little form where you can fill this out, and we'll get that thing scheduled ASAP. Also, inside the description here, you'll find a link right here to where it'll take you where you can get my books right here, the 85-15 diet plan, and also the toilet book as well. You can check those out right about now, and I'll send that right to your doorstep. All right. This one, I believe, it's been a while. I think this one's also available on ebooks as well. So, and also, yes, last but not least, you'll see links to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, also Twitter as well. All at Fitness Charles. So make sure you follow me there so you can stay up to date with me on my content there. All right. Let's see if we got any questions here today. Quiet on a Wednesday. If you ever check this video out, if you check the replay out, always drop a comment if you have a question. I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Again, make sure you are liking this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, turn your notifications on so that you're always up to date with the latest content. We are streaming every Monday and Wednesday at 6 p.m. Central Time. Every now and again, I'll pop up on the weekends. Maybe I'll pop up this weekend as well, so look out for that. And then also, as I always say, I'll catch y'all next week, but be happy.